Does everyone see Lily? Hello. Lily wanted to jump up on my lap about a minute before we went live, which is absolutely fine because I love her. But I can do this without scaring her because she's stone cold deaf. Let me mute that because I think I can hear myself coming out of my own speakers. That stopped it. Hey, Lily. So I went a bit naff and I bought myself some of these, and I bought myself some poppers, some party poppers. Please calm down. To celebrate. And then about 10 minutes ago, I thought I'd better get dressed up, and now I realise that I look like I'm at a sort of really naff office party. Mate, I wanted to try and get the streamers over the camera, but no. So you'll have to forgive the naff office party aesthetic, but there is a very important reason why I have gathered you all here. And it is to announce that one of you is a werewolf. Wouldn't that be so cool? It's to do a little bit of a to launch off my new book, The Well at the End of the World. Lily wants to get down now. Come on, babes. Come on. There you go. Off she goes. She's sick and tired of me talking about the book already, so she's off. I can hardly blame her. She's 15, she's stone cold deaf, and she knows her own mind, and when she wants to get down, she gets down with a little help. So yeah, I'm releasing my second book, The Well at the End of the World. So I wanted to just do a little sort of bell and whistles around it, and let you guys know a little bit about it. Talk about a competition I've got running to win a signed copy of the book, to explain what the book's about, and also to let you know about a couple of other a freebie thing I'm running, and a newsletter I've started. But The Well at the End of the World is a writing project, maybe 25 years in the making. I know it's a bit slim for all of that, but I had the original idea back in my early 20s when I wanted to write something that had the structure of the Amicus Portmanteau movies. I loved the idea that you could get five guys in a train or stuck in a lift, and each one would tell their own individual story. So you'd have a little standalone story, and then you always come back to the framing device. And that was the seed of it, and that is the structure of The Well at the End of the World. I don't want to tell you too much about what's inside, because it is a story that I think works best when it reveals itself to you. But I will say that it is about a young girl called Jemima who lives in a very rundown desert town. There's a little bit of a feel at the opening of the book to, I guess, Stephen King's The Gunslinger, that kind of vibe to it. This is a world that's very much moved on. To my mind, the town where she lives in, on the edge of a huge desert, pounded by the sun constantly, to my mind, that town could possibly even be the last outpost of humanity. The rest of the planet could already be dead. And out of the desert, a figure comes. Let me give you a little flavor I'll do a real quick reading. Shall I read to you just from the opening of the book, part one, The Storyteller? Gazing out of the schoolhouse window, young Jemima Hayes was the first to notice the distant shape on the plains. She'd been daydreaming, and at first she thought that she had imagined this slow-moving thing to distract from the drone of the day's lessons. She expected it to disappear with each blink, but it remained stubbornly there, and so she acknowledged that there was indeed something out in the desert, and it was drawing closer to their small town. What could be roaming in such heat, she wondered. Out there, the swelter was relentless and merciless. Everyone knew that the plains were dangerous, but for some of the children, they were also exciting in a forbidden kind of way. The rocky flats stretched out in all directions, broken only by nearby Cemetery Hill and the distant mountains to the west. Jemima regarded those plains with a strange mixture of feelings, a concoction of fear, contempt, and respect. She had only recently turned 11, but that sun-blasted landscape had already taken much from her. Now, without venturing into spoilers, the figure that's approaching is a man, a sort of man with no name kind of figure that she comes to know as the storyteller. Part one is called The Storyteller. And within Jemima's story, we have three stories within stories that sort of thematically bleed out into the main framing device, but go in some weird and wonderful and strange directions that I hope you'll enjoy and that I don't particularly want to spoil here. What else can I tell you? Yes, I'm running a competition to win signed copies of the book, if you're at all interested. So I've started a newsletter on Substack, and depending on the number of subscribers I get will depend on the number of signed copies I can give away. So if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, and I won't spam you with tons of posts, I absolutely promise you, but I will next week choose from random from the subscribers of that newsletter. The link is in the description of this particular video, and someone will win a signed copy. If I get 50 or more subscribers, I'll happily do 2 signed copies. If I get 100 or more subscribers, 5 signed copies. But that newsletter is intended to be sort of more focused on the writing. It's called Writing Horror and Writing Horror. So there'll definitely be some horror stuff in there. But further down the line, I want to run some more newsletter subscriber competitions. The next book I'm going to be writing is much more in the horror vein, and I actually want to run a subscriber competition to be killed off in that book. So if that's of interest to you, subscribe now, and hopefully you'll enjoy the newsletters between now and whenever I get to the point where I can run a competition for you to be killed off in my next book. The Well at the End of the World isn't horror. I'd say it's sort of more towards the dark fantasy mold. There's certainly, as we get into some of the stories within stories, elements of Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, which I find I always seem to return to as an inspiration for some of my sort of weirder and more fantastical or magical stories. Just to give you a little idea of how strange some of those other stories can get before we return to Jemima and the framing narrative, I want to read you a tiny little extract from the second of the 3 stories within the stories there. The story is called A Kiss, and this isn't the start of the story. We'll just dive in a couple of pages in. The first time Adam died, it was in a glade in the woods. His head was heavy, and he sat with the rough bark of a tree at his back. The pain in his chest had dulled, but it was difficult to breathe. He didn't have the strength to get up. He thought of a girl who had probably forgotten his name, and he did not appreciate the irony that, young as he was, it was his heart that was going to kill him. There was an imperfect oval of blue sky above him beyond the heavy green canopy. He stared into it. The sun was there, small and white like a branding iron. Birds were chattering in the branches all around, and he began to sag. His vision was getting shady, as if cobwebs were falling over his eyes. The overwhelming enormity of the sky seemed to press down on him. Even if someone found me now, he thought. His pulse was thready. He tried to raise a hand to wipe away the fog, but he couldn't find the strength. He tried to close his eyes, but he couldn't do that either. The cobwebs were falling thicker now, but the sun still burned inside that oval pool. His thoughts became sluggish as he sank. It felt as if he was suspended in thick, warm water. There were occasional sounds like far-off thunder, muffled as if heard through cotton wool. As the cobwebs wrapped him in darkness, he melted away, down to the very core of himself, until there was very nearly nothing left. He floated like this for a time, a microscopic speck in an ocean of blood. An age seemed to pass. Then he began to twitch and grow once again. His body ballooned, gorging itself, absorbing the blood that surrounded him. His skin stretched past transparency until he lay on the grass of some other place, a man of blood, held together by a thin, film-like layer of surface tension. His new form trembled, and he concentrated on holding himself together, quivering like a drop of dew upon a leaf. There were no sights or sounds anymore, and for a time this liquid consciousness was all he knew. Then he became aware of the tremors of careful footsteps approaching, and each footfall sent ripples through him. When she reached his side, the woman, Eve, crouched to gaze at her reflection in the curious pool of his face. So it does go to some strange and weird places. It's a book that I think you can read in one sitting and hopefully sort of wallow in the strange dark fairy tale vibe of it all. It's very close to my heart. It's a sort of passion project, and I'm very, very excited to bring it to you. I think it might be time to see if I can read some of these comments. Well, hello everyone. Hello Richard. Hello James. And yeah, you're right, lovely Lily. Tideline Runners is on a train, so I may dip in and out. Well, crikey, thanks so much for tuning in on a train. Yeah, definitely a Beast Must Die reference, James. To one of you as well. Also a Haunted Honeymoon reference, an unloved Gene Wilder film, an underrated Gene Wilder film that I highly recommend. I think it's absolutely hilarious. It's not Young Frankenstein, but what is apart from Young Frankenstein? But Haunted Honeymoon, top notch. Congratulations on the book, Andrew. I've missed the red wine monologues. Cheers, Damo. I did look back, and the last time I went live was a couple of times in 2020 during those dark times. This is fun. I should do more live stuff, but then I'll run out of things to say, like I kind of already have. But it's probably nice to keep things brief. Thanks, horror fan Andy. Thanks, Paul. I do love the cover. I got very lucky with a copyright free image. None of it's my work. Well, the font is. Well, no, the typeface. I chose it. I clicked it. I did some clicking. I did a couple of clicks. Yeah, that's my contribution to my book cover. Speaking of Amicus, Andrew, you're vaguely reminding me of Tom Baker's character in The Vault of Horror. No, I'll take that. Oh, yeah, I am sort of growing out a bit, aren't I? I'm getting a bit bushy, but no, I'll take that. Fucking A, yeah. Oh, that opening sounded intriguing. Thank you very much. Wine envy. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ross, but I do like a touch of the old Malbec, and it steadies the nerves when you're making a prat of yourself, like I'm doing now, because I can't edit out all the ums and the ers. And you get what I'm trying to say? As a way of marking the release of the book, what I have done is I've made the ebook copy of 17 Stories of Death and Desire free on Amazon for the next 5 days. The link to that is also down in the description. I've tweeted that out a few times, today, already, and yeah, and it's my latest newsletter sort of, is reminding my current subscribers that they can get that. So 14 people today have already taken advantage of a free ebook of 17 stories of death and desire, which I think is pretty fantastic. But that offer is going to be running for 5 days. What I would suggest is you've already been intensely kind enough to buy a physical copy of this collection of horror short stories. You won't lose anything by downloading a free digital version of it, and it can sit there on your phone. And as I suggest in my newsletter, if you get stuck on a long train journey, or stuck in a lift or something, you can bring it up on your phone and you can read that weird octopus sex story that's in here again, if you like. Or if you're on a bus and you don't want to listen to the people coughing behind you, put some noise cancelling headphones on, bring up the digital copy of 17 Stories of Death and Desire, and check out that story about the murderous talking seagull again, or that game of football. If any of you out there have already bought and read this collection, thank you. And you know exactly what I mean by that game of football. Uh, hey, James has already subscribed to my newsletter. Cheers, mate. Uh, Jambo Shango, can I send you my books for signing? Lol. You can if you really want me to devalue them. Um, you can. You can DM me. We're on. You can find me on Twitter. You can all find me on Twitter at Grumpy Andrew if you want. By all means. Uh, Richard Hawkins. Question: how long did it take to actually write, or was it actually 25 years writing? So, okay, that's a really good question. Um, no, I wrote a version of this about 25 years ago that was much bigger than this. It was thicker than this. It was called Telling Tales. Um, Not a particularly great title, but it was a sort of pun on the very first version of it, the three stories within stories. The framing story is pretty much as it is now. I came back to that and was like, that's pretty much good to go. But the stories within stories that I had in there, um, originally were sort of, how best to describe this without making myself sound like an absolute wanker. Um, the third of the three stories was a standalone short story that I had written for my then girlfriend, and then I sort of thought, but that's very much a sort of Angela Carter vibe thing to it, and a, a lot of stuff about our relationship was sort of codified into it, if you like. And if you knew, you knew, and if you didn't know, you wouldn't notice. And I thought it would be interesting if I did that for all three of the stories. So, in hindsight, with a hopefully wiser, certainly shaggier head on my shoulders, that was an absolute load of self-indulgent wank. But when I was after I'd finished the horror story collection, I was going back through my stuff, seeing if there was anything I could sort of pull out to use. I mean, I was doing it while I was putting this together. If you never throw out, if any aspiring writers out there, never throw out anything. One of the stories in this took inspiration from an unfinished piece from from fucking ages ago, and I jettisoned the story completely and kept the title because I really loved the title, but it was just but the returning to that title was a springboard for something else. Um, so I was scouring around and I found the old manuscript for Telling Tales and I read through it and honestly, some of it was good and an awful lot of it was utter garbage, but I still felt there was something there. There was something to it. It is. I appreciate that it's not the most. It's it's difficult to explain what it is. I guess it's a novella, but you could also argue the toss that it's a short story collection. Um, is it fantasy? There's not so much of the sort of more generic fantasy. Is it magical realism? I mean, it's kind of a hard sell, but I just couldn't leave it alone. Once I'd reread it, it sort of it really did call to me and say, You need to do something with this." One of the 3 stories within stories I got rid of completely because it was shit, and I've written a brand new story to open it up with, which I'm really pleased with, that I don't wanna tell you anything about because I think it's a sort of surprise, it's a good experience to turn the page and then there it is. Um, one of the most original section of it, the oldest section of it, that story for my girlfriend at the time from university, um, I stripped out 60% of it because it was all flowery. It was all utter flowery nonsense. I was such a tragic English literature student that, and hopefully I've got better at writing. I think I have. I think I've got more precise because I managed to strip out 60% of the story and keep 100% of the sense of the story. I think it's a better story for it. I think this is a novella written by someone who's got a bit more life experience, whereas 25 years ago, that manuscript was way too eager to please. It had uh, ideas way above its station of being sort of literary and this and that's all just nonsense. And hopefully, I've stripped out all of the nonsense and kept a good story that hopefully, if you give it a chance, will surprise you at turns and sort of pull you through to the end. So sorry for that long rambling answer. So no, not 25 years of writing, but maybe a year or two back when I was younger, and then when I returned to it 25 years later, I couldn't let it go. I had to try and give it CPR. It sort of demanded that I bring it back to life. So even if honestly, even if no one buys it, and no one likes it, I'm glad it's out there. I had to put it out there. I'm thankful a couple of people have read advanced copies of it and seem to dig it. I think it's one of if it finds its audience, even if that audience is just those 2 people and me, then then I will have failed. Um, there will be lots of people dying in lots of horrible ways in my next book, and I'm very keen to run that newsletter competition to have some real people, die in that. But first thing I need to do is get off my arse and start planning and then writing. Um, Horror fan Andy, strange and weird, right on my street. Fantastic. I mean, I really hope it's such a personal thing to me. I kind of think, "Oh, no one's gonna like it, no one's gonna get it," and that's fine. If it turns out that some of you guys really do dig it, that will be really, edifying. That'd be yeah, like, yeah. I don't know what I should think in that story. James, JLB Zombie, I gotta ask, where did the idea for Nocturia come from? It's my favorite out of 17 short stories next to The Rest Is Pieces. Nocturia was so messed up. Oh, okay, James. Cool. So yeah, Nocturia is a story that's in 17 Stories of Death and Desire. Where did that one come from? Um, I, I I guess I had seen on the trot um, a couple of sort of exploitation movies that were um, horror movies that were lots of boobs and gore and sort of uh, reveled in things being done to women's bodies. Excuse me. And there's there's a for that in horror, but it's the two on the trot made me just think. I don't really think I've seen anything to that extent that fetishizes the messing up of the male body in quite the same way. So I kind of let's call a spade a spade. I wanted to write a penis body horror story. I wanted to try and write a story that would make guys cross their and make some women go, "Yes, let's redress a little bit of the balance." I want so in order for that to work, I had to create a character who absolutely deserves uh, everything he gets, and then I came up with the ending and worked backwards. So I'm not going to give away the ending in case people out there haven't read it and want to sort of get the free ebook and find out for themselves. But I wanted to find in nature, and although this is an absolutely fantastical story, there is an example in nature of the ultimate role reversal of what we. I'm being oblique here, but what we hold true to be the ultimate thing that a woman can do that a man can't do. There is an example in nature where uh, uh, those roles are reversed. And I thought, what if I take prick of a guy and put him through the ringer like that to reach this sort of grand guignol moment of climax. Let's put it that way. So that's where the idea came from. Um, I'd just been watching lots of women get cut up on the screen and thought, let's have a guy go through the ringer for once. And because I don't think I'd seen that before. Thanks for the question. What to say? Paula said, no, the penis story. I didn't like it. I was all squirmy the whole way through. Sorry, Paul, but that's exactly what I wanted you to be when you were reading it. Richard says, "Lovely wallpaper, Andrew." It is. I have anything else to say? Pimped the book. I've pimped the newsletter, and if you subscribe, there's a chance you can win a signed copy of this. But there'll be tons of fun stuff between now and then. Actually, thanks, James, for asking about a story from this, because one of the things I might do in the newsletter is give little sort of behind the scenes sneaky peeks of stories from 17 stories. I can let you what stuff from the last story is true. I can tell you about the creepy incidents that happened with the writing of the first story, Crowthorne. I can, so yeah, I can talk about stories behind the stories in the newsletter if that's stuff you're interested in. I've let you know that you can get a free ebook of this, and there we are. I think that's all. I think that's all there is to say. Out. So thank you so much for your time this evening. I genuinely appreciate it. Um, thanks for listening to me ramble. Um, cheers to you all. To your very, very good health. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful spring. Spring is here. The clocks went forward, so it doesn't feel like spring is here, but it'll come round soon enough. It'll come. What a wonderful sentiment to end on. What an idiot I'm making of myself now. Bye bye.